Hi everyone. Today Nicole and I are with you to talk about growing resilience. What is resilience? I suppose is a good place to start. And it's the capacity to quickly recover from difficulties, how well we bounce back from adversity. There are various levels of resilience, and there's physical resilience, and there's mental, emotional, and spiritual, I don't know why I keep tripping over that word, resilience, which we've wrapped up into a package called psycho-resilience. And Nicole's going to go on and talk about that soon. But I'm going to start with physical resilience. And that when we are physically resilient, we can maintain high levels of energy. And many years ago, some of you know, I was quite ill for a long period of time, over 10 years. And I came to understand that our physical resilience is the foundation for our mental and emotional and our spiritual resilience too, because let's face it, if you're unwell, it's hard to get out of bed in the morning. It's hard to deal with things emotionally and to connect with other things that are greater than ourselves. So making sure that you eat properly is really important. And I know you've heard this from many people before, you know, particularly since the 1970s health revolution, which I actually lived through when I was around when all the health shops opened up, and that was wonderful. But there are other reasons to eat well too, and I wanted to talk about those because I had a strange experience many years ago. I went on a raw food diet for 6 months, and I found that over a particular period, over that time, that my mind became very clear and my emotions became calm. So I discovered that the really close connection between our diet and how we face the world. So, and after about, I think it was about 4 or 5 months of being on this raw food diet, and I didn't do it to lose weight or anything like that, it was to do with health because I was really unwell. And I still believe that the body can heal itself if all the conditions are right. So I was trying to give it the best conditions that I could. So one day, out of the blue, I ate a piece of chocolate. And I had a really interesting experience. I suddenly became very aggravated and nothing had happened. Those emotions just switched on like that. I felt really angry and frustrated. And I just couldn't understand why. And then, of course, I realised that had to be a response to the one tiny piece of chocolate that I had eaten after cleansing my body for so long. So it became very apparent to me, quite easily actually, that our diet and our health are very, very closely related to our resilient abilities. And from there, I became very interested in iridology. So I was looking into the constitution of each individual, because resilience grows out of that constitution. And if you look in the mirror at your own eyes, you can see the colour of your iris, and in your iris are different patterns. And if you look at like my eyes have straight lines come radiating out from the pupil to the edge of my iris, like the spokes of a wheel. And that is the designation of a person with a really strong constitution. So, and I've had to test that out, unfortunately, but now I know. But then you'll get people who have different patterns, like they'll have like a honeycomb pattern in their iris, or they have something what's called flower, and those people's constitution is less strong. And I think, therefore, that means that their resilience, at least their physical resilience, is not as strong as other people's. So those people in particular have to take very good care of their health, so that they can manage how they can face the world, how they can respond to adversity, and bounce back. So what about you, Nicole? What about taking us on from there
I love what you're sharing there. I always learn something in conversation with you, Sheryl. It's wonderful. Um, what it reminded me of was the closest I can come to. I haven't done 6 months on raw food, but I've been through juicing phases, and the longest I did on a juicing phase, which was juices only, mostly vegetable with a bit of fruit in there, was close to a month. And every now and then I'd have a bit of a raw food dish to go along with that. And my husband is one who fasts frequently, you know, for long amounts of time, and it was really inspired from him and understanding this connection between mind and thought and the clarity that can come when the body is clear. Now, I'm not one to fast. I love food way too much, so juicing is my option because I'm still getting something. But I really relate to what you're saying there, because I experience, like you, just this heightened sensitivity and clearness from within, to the point where, exactly like you're saying, with one piece of chocolate, it could have been the smallest thing, but if anything is introduced within that time, it's seriously blown out of proportion, because we've just become so highly attuned and sensitive. And it makes me reflect on where I'm at now, and I'm not juicing nearly as much as I know you know, what is my optimum when I do. And I think of what I'm putting into my system now, and how different that is from when I'm in that same, you know, full on raw juice mode for so long. And it's so interesting, isn't it, how the body can adapt in such a way. But that relationship, and Teresa's, who's watching here, hi Teresa, has also mentioned, you know, that the food, that idea that the belly is one of the brains. And absolutely, you know, what is it that we're putting into ourselves, from which we have these emotions, thoughts, and reactions that we're usually not aware of most of the time, because we're just operating. We're not thinking about, you know, that's what I put in my belly, therefore this is just my normal mode of operation. And you're right, in the conversations of resilience, that status point that we're at, whatever that kind of baseline that we're at, whether it's, you know, pure foods, etc., and we're operating from that place, or we've been filling ourselves with total trash and we're operating from that place, how we then respond, our level of resilience in that moment based on our starting point, is completely different. And of course, when we think about resilience, we're not necessarily thinking 10 steps back to the intake of, I mean, we're just talking about the physical here. We haven't even got onto the other dimensions yet of you know, psycho-spiritual resilience. What a massive starting point to be at in terms of how it affects our ability to be resilient and how we respond and move forward with our resilience.
Mm. And I was just going to finish off with that part, and I'm hoping to get someone on here soon who has a lot of knowledge about nutrition and how that can affect our body. Is that I found, when I said my mind was clear, my mind could also hold greater thoughts, bigger thoughts, bigger than I was, bigger than I had been holding before. So I didn't really understand till then about how our diet affects our mind, not just our emotions, but our mind. And I was having higher minded thoughts, if you could say it like that. And I was also getting glimpses of new thought, actually having visions of something on the horizon that was big and vast. And if I kept going the way I was, I could have taken in more information. And it reminds me of people who talk about having near-death experiences. And when they're in that particular, out of their body in another place, which we might call heaven or the afterlife or whatever it is, they say they know how the universe works. Their mind is expanded and they can understand things which they couldn't ordinarily do under normal circumstances. So it is interesting how, for me, how that is a potential if we can get our physical resilience in order.
Absolutely. The quality of where we're at, the quality of how we're able to respond in the world. And how often do we step back and look at, you know, getting the house in order? Really. And of course, as we keep saying again and again in our weekly conversations, isn't this the most supreme invitation right now, as the world has slowed down, to get our houses in order? And we saw it immediately. If you went to, and I'm sure many of you did, if you went to your local gardening shop or your homewares shop, people were there and they're taking care of their yards right now. I mean, I've been down on my knees digging out weeds in this place that we're living in. I've never had to deal with a lawn before. We've got this big lawn in this wonderful house that we're living in right now, but it has a lot of weeds. And so, you know, I'm down on my knees and I'm digging out these weeds, and I've been saying to my family, I tell you what, people's places are going to look spectacular once this is all over, because that's what you do, isn't it? Once you're confined to a space, we like pretty things. We want to have a nice place to live in. We want to beautify our space. And so people are tending to their gardens. People are tending to their house. They're fixing all the things. I know people that work in construction, and actually some of their work has gone down because now people are doing a whole lot of DIY as opposed to getting the builders to come. And so one of our immediate responses that people had was people were tending to our physical immediate environments. Fantastic. So now that this period is extended a little bit, of course, that activity of tending to our house on the outside naturally has an effect of tending to our inner gardens, our inner homes. I think it's happening. I think it's happening a whole heap right now, and that is a beautiful and also a pretty complicated thing. And this is something I wanted to touch in on when we get into more of the psycho-spiritual house cleaning. There is going to be stuff coming up for people right now, because in the same way when you tend to your yard and the weeds are inevitably going to come up amongst all the beautiful other things that are there, we're going to encounter the cobwebs, the historical cobwebs outside and within. We're going to encounter corners of the inner and outer garden that we hadn't explored before. So it's happening, and many people are going through this house clearing, outer and inner process in the privacy of their own spaces, without sharing much about it, without having the opportunity to really share about it, and perhaps without even having the language or knowing how to share about these things. And again, in that wider conversation we're having on resilience, I really think, you know, what comes to me, the image that comes when I think about resilience is like the marathon runner or mountain climbing. This is a long-term thing, you know, this is not the sprint. And so when we're in something for the long haul, because none of us truly know when this is going to end, and if it does, will it resurface? And again, we don't have control over those mechanisms, the governmental mechanisms that are kind of ruling aspects of our lives right now. But let's just say we're in it, generally speaking, for the long haul, long enough that people are making changes right now in the education system. You know, pieces are changing in the workplace, within the financial systems. I mean, some of those big clunky ways that we organize ourselves are shifting. And that's a really big deal. It's a really big deal, because we've all been operating on this if it ain't broke, don't fix it mentality, even though it's been pretty broke for some time. So that the fact that those archaic and very clunky organizational systems, societal organizations, systems are shifting, indicates to us that there is something, you know, we're in a long haul process right now. Otherwise, there'd be no need to shift anything at that level. So how does that translate in each of our lives right now in terms of having endurance, where resilience is, of course, part of, they go hand in hand, endurance, resilience, you know. So if we're in it for the long haul, this marathon, which I don't run marathons, so perhaps that isn't an analogy I should use, but I do love walking, and I can walk for days and weeks. So let's go with the mountain climbing, because I'll make it personal. But you use your own analogy, those of you watching out there, in terms of what works for you in that long-term endurance and resilience. When we go at it for a long time, there's a different pace now that's involved, and we slow down, and we have to think a bit more sustainably in terms of our energy. So that looks quite different. And so resilience is such this wonderful conversation to have, because as we carry on with that, things will arise. We will meet things that we're going to have to deal with. And resilience is one of those common threads throughout that really, you know, asks us, well, how do you want to be through all of this? How do you want to keep going? How are you going to bounce back? How are you going to pick yourself up when you fall on your face yet again? Or when you see others around who are just, you know, toppling over? How do we want to walk forward collectively? So it's a really profound thread. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually heard from a friend yesterday that who she doesn't work because she has 3 kids at home, but her partner just lost his job yesterday and they've been renting, and I'm thinking, oh, poor things, how are they going to bounce back from that? But I know they're both really strong and they have confidence, and I know that they will. But, you know, there's a lot of people out there who don't have those. They can't find it hard to draw on that, on those facets within themselves, and to just pick themselves up and move on. And yeah, and you know, it's about having a good attitude. And I was just going to briefly mention also about shifting slightly. My late husband was, amongst many things, he was a mechanical engineer. He was a senior lecturer at the University of Queensland for 13 years, and he was an inventor. And inventors have a really good attitude when it comes to resilience, because they don't dwell on failure at all, right? They question why something didn't work, and then they learn from it. And that comes back to attitude within our resilience, how we develop that, and how we shift our perception from when we try something and it seemingly fails, to what can I learn from this? And that's not just in inventing things, that's in relationships, that's in jobs, that's in businesses that we might try, to our own businesses. It's all sorts of things, all sorts of ways it goes through our life. So I think having a really good really good attitude is important in maintaining a healthy resilience.
Yeah, and you bring up a great point there about a level of detachment from the process as well that inventors can have. When we can be detached from the outcome, we have to be engaged in the process because we're in it, right? And we have to do it. So here we all are now collectively going through a collective process. So we're in it and we have to, you know, participate to some degree. Or not. Choosing not to participate is also a level of participation, right? Because we're just all in it right now. But can we be detached from the greater outcome? Is there a level of detachment that we can cultivate within ourselves from the bombardment of information that is coming from the statistics that keep pouring through, from the mainstream media, from all of the other medias that are having ideas about what's happening right now as well? There's so much floating around, and having that inventor's mind, you know, if we can engage that. I mean, they have the inventor's mind. It's that rational mindset, isn't it? It's being able to look at what works, what doesn't, a very scientific approach, you know?
Yeah.
It's not a deep value base, right? It kind of resides here in energy rather than in the heart here. And if we're here, this mind can detach a little bit from the rest of those deep values that are within us, and can look at, you know, what is the next step? What is the next step? What is truth in this situation? And carry on like that. Now, I'm not saying we need to detach from ourselves. We need to be fully embodied. I mean, of course we do. It can, though, be very helpful, particularly for those of us who are strong in our value sets. And one of the big things that is happening right now are people's values are being reset in many ways. People are having to reevaluate where they're at and how they're conducting themselves in the world. yes, engage that, and, you know, be aware that one of the modes that we can practice to help with being resilient is that level of detachment as well.
Yeah, very important, I think. I guess to sum that all up, it's a resilience is an attitude towards falling, in a way. Do you think? Could it be something like that? I remember when my daughter was very young, and as most parents who have little children, they fall over, you up you get. So it's sort of that attitude of up you get, bounce back, let's go and let's move on. And what's the next thing? You know, so I think that's sort of, for me, that analogy of a little child falling over and getting up is what resilience is all about, really.
And there's such a lightness to that, the way that you express that. And you're right. You know, I think you in the description of today, there was something about moping and coping and hoping. And exactly, if we look at that reaction of a little child, the moment that child falls, and if we all pay attention and we freak out about it in that moment, then it becomes heightened, right? Then the child is like, wow, yeah, I did fall. Did I hurt myself? And now we have a whole episode that's potentially on our hands. And you're right, though, if it's just a quick up we get, you know, brush off and straight to the next thing, we can shift. We can stay, you know, we can shift mode, shift gears very quickly. So if we apply that to how we're currently being in the world right now, I mean, many of us might feel like we've fallen flat on our face. And that's very uncomfortable. We're not used to doing that. And so are we able to pick ourselves up again? Many times, you know, does it hurt? Do we have to tend to and lick our wounds or not? Do we need to have a lot of attention paid to us as we're going through that process or not? You know, having a bit of self-observance through the process in terms of how we fall down and how we pick ourselves up again, and the degree of support that we need as we do so. And there's nothing wrong with needing support as we do. These are all great ways to be even more self-aware in the present moment. Yeah.
Yeah, great advice there, great advice. And I guess, you know, some people are naturally irrepressible. They just go on. They just do, you know, nothing phases them. They just continue to go on. It's really amazing. And those, you know, I think the times when resilience fails through adversity is when we emotionally close down. And like you were saying, like you need to feel these things. Because resilience can't enter a closed mind or a closed heart. You know, if we're closed down, it's really hard to connect to that, for that to actually express itself. And it's also about perception of circumstances too, like I was saying before. The attitude, is the glass half empty or is it half full? Do I have less than others, or am I lucky to have what I have? Those sorts of things, you know. So it's all wrapped up in that wonderfully healthy resilience package that we can all have. And of course that leads us to spiritual resilience too, doesn't it? And I think it's, for me, I had to find that within myself during the time that I was very ill, and because I reached out to something that was beyond me. And I've spoken about this before, so I'll just touch it briefly. That when I was ill and I didn't know if I was going to live till next week, I surrendered to something greater than myself, and I was okay with the outcome, whatever that was. If the outcome was that I wouldn't survive, that was okay. I was cool with that. If the outcome was that I would, well, that was great too. I'd be okay with that. So it's about, like you're saying, detaching and letting go of the outcome of situations. And I think when we connect to something that is greater than us in our darkest hours, that creates within ourselves a spiritual resilience. It's the beginning, I think, of that, because then something greater than us can also step in and meet us to help lift us up out of that adversarial situation.
That reminds me of that, what's that beautiful poem that people talk about all the time when, you know, I was walking along the beach and there was that one set of footprints, I think it's called.
Uh-huh.
That gorgeous, you know, that gorgeous poem. And, you know, and I looked back to see that there was only one set of prints, thinking that I was alone, and yet later came to realize that you had actually carried me and lifted me. And I think that's such a beautiful aspect you introduced there, Sheryl, about grace through adversity as well. Yeah.
Yes, interesting, isn't it? I remember some years ago I went to a group meeting for the Edgar Cayce Foundation, and there was a woman there whose son had died, and she was really just going through a dark night of the soul experience, which I won't go into now, but maybe we can talk about that in a future episode. She believed in God, but she said one day she found herself saying to God, I give my pain over to you because I cannot bear this on my own anymore. From that point, she was able to carry on with her life. So she connected to something, she drew on what she believed to be real and greater than herself, and could step in and help carry her burden, and that actually did. So it's a really interesting experience. It was great to be able to hear her say that. It was such a precious moment that everyone just, you know, we almost just broke down into tears at her revealing such a difficult moment in her time, but finding that, gathering that grace to help her through it.
I think part of what's coming out of this conversation today are some of the core traits of resilient people, you know, and so an awareness of what we're putting into our systems and health. Let's put that in terms of physical health, you know, was one theme that came out there, and here the ability to surrender. To surrender to something greater, and a level of acceptance of a process as well, inviting grace into one's life. That too as another common theme. It'd be great to hear, we have a couple of people joining us as well live, and for those in the replay to hear as well what themes you feel are key with resilience. What is a resilient person? What makes a resilient person?
Yeah.
I'd love to share a bit, Sheryl, with in terms of the psycho-spiritual resilience pieces. Did you want to say something just now before I jump?
No, please go on.
Okay. So you know, one of the traits I guess I would put in terms of resilience too. Oh, and that was another one we mentioned, the ability to pick yourself up again and again and again and again. How do we, you know, when we fall, how do we get up again, and, you know, pieces around that. So that too is another continued theme. One that is strong for me is viewing adversity or challenging situations as invitations. And so it's having a positive mindset. And you addressed that earlier, Sheryl, having a positive mindset that can frame. Tony Robbins puts it beautifully, instead of saying, you know, what if everything was happening for you, not to you? And so if we can see adverse situations and challenges as invitations to grow, even when there's a great discomfort in being stretched, it primes us in a way where we can take away from it some of the gifts, and we have a greater endurance through what might be an uncomfortable situation. So in preparation for today's conversation, I wanted to share with you, there was a book that popped out of my shelf and said, share me, I want to be part of this conversation. And it's a book called Father Shores by a lady, Dr. Yvonne Kaysen, who is, I know her personally, absolutely splendid lady. And she was a medical doctor and psychotherapist over in Toronto many years ago practicing, and she actually coined the term spiritually transformative experience. And this book, I think, even though she's talking in the book about spiritually transformative experiences, and she has a revised version that's just come out recently, I think it's called Touched by the Light. It just came out this year or last year. Even though it's spiritual experiences that she's talking about here, she has these sections in it where this comes from a medical doctor who has had numerous spiritually transformative and near-death experiences. So she's able to really frame transformation on the psycho-spiritual level in terms that the mainstream can grasp because she's been in medicine. So I wanted to share with you a bit of the wisdom that has come out of this book. So 3 bits are key here. One of them, in terms of the conversation of psycho-spiritual resilience, the first being living with transformation. So we touched, how do we do that? How do we live with the transformation well? And again, we talked about the mountain climb beforehand and the long haul endurance that is required for that. So part of that is, of course, the balanced lifestyle. Food we've spoken about. And don't underestimate the power of the beautiful triad of sleep, food, and exercise. Yeah. So simple, so basic. And yet, you know, when we simply do those 3 things well, we sleep enough where we feel rested. So we allow our body to restore and do its own magic. We nourish ourselves with things that we know are life-giving and life-supporting. And we can take that a step further, like Sheryl was talking about there, and, you know, go even deeper into that in helping the body have its own processes of all raw foods, etc. And the other is our psycho-spiritual health, tending to our own process, you know, of mind, of body, life force, energy. These are more subtle practices that we might not necessarily attune ourselves to a lot of the time or pay attention to. And yet it's vitally important, just as much as we'd pay attention to the material aspects. Paying attention also to those more subtle aspects is going to help us live with that transformation as we go through. Another really important point, I love this, and again, we've touched on this to some degree, is about house cleaning. So we talked about the physical house cleaning that goes on, and I wanted to go a layer deeper then into the psycho-spiritual house cleaning and what that actually looks like, because I can assure you there's a lot of people going through this right now that might not actually be aware of what it is and why these things are happening. So if this is you, you know, here might be some of the things that can occur. We might have old memories and patterns that are coming back right now, and they might just pop back spontaneously. So it's things like when you're out gardening, when you're out cooking, when you're tending to the household, there can be the inner household cobwebs that are re-emerging and resurfacing. Understand that that is a natural part of a slowing down process and a clearing process. That's a good thing, even though it really might feel awkward. You might not want to deal with it. You might not want to go there. The fact that we're giving ourselves space in our lives and we're breathing means that there's now space in our being for these things to come forward. Our bodies are, oh my goodness, they are just so incredible, aren't they, Sheryl? Our bodies and their capacity to hold pieces of us is absolutely incredible. You know, I've shared this story with you before. I had this one experience where I was going in and out of regular and non-ordinary states of consciousness for 3 days spontaneously on a couch. And that was this psycho-spiritual house cleaning, because I hadn't done enough of my own work. I'd done a lot of self-work to that point, but clearly there were pieces that just really needed to be addressed, and I wasn't willing in my conscious mind to go there yet. My body shut down. And in it shutting down, it forced me to be still. I literally couldn't get off a couch. I managed to get to a bathroom a couple of times in that, but 3 days on a couch, didn't go anywhere else. And in that being still, it was wild how far I was traveling in terms of the psycho-spiritual world. There was so much going on, reconfiguring, recorrecting, clearing out. I call it wading through molasses, because that's what a lot of it felt like. It was just dark and heavy, and my body was like, enough. We've held this for long enough. It's time to let it go. It's time to clear it out. Yours might not be as dramatic as that right now, but there might be you know, pockets of molasses coming up where it's like, wait, you know, I thought we'd dealt with that already. That might feel like, hey, we just have the space to come forward right now, so we're doing that. Simple, acknowledge, thank you very much, keep breathing it forward. You know, we don't have to mope over and we don't have to continually recycle, you know, those pieces, but there they are, and, you know, let them, blow them into the breeze. Have a ceremony if that feels appropriate, you know, go have a little fire pit and you know, like it's autumn here in Australia, so it's that time of shedding naturally. And of course, if you're watching this from the Northern Hemisphere, it's a different energy that's going on there, but nonetheless, there can always be a clearing that is happening. Other pieces of psycho-spiritual house cleaning that can come forward, and again, this comes out of this wonderful book, Father Shaw's, so, you know, it's worth diving into. It's a doctor's perspective, medical doctor. Surfacing traumas. Collectively, it's pretty traumatic to hear every single day how many people are dying. And if we have, we've all lost somebody, you know, the longer you're on the planet, the more people you're going to lose. That's the nature of this game. But that doesn't make it any easier. And even if you've had near-death experiences and you're okay with the fact of dying, it still doesn't make the grief. The grief can still be there. You can still grieve, you know, potentially losing others or still losing one's own life. So because we're surrounded, our collective mind is attuned so much right now to people dying on this planet and people in ill health, that can be triggering a whole heap of traumas in folks at this point in time that might be related to some level of a grief process. So again, if that's something that's taking place for you, acknowledge it's there. You don't have to dive into it, though maybe you want to. And so pick a therapist, pick a practice, pick something that's going to help give it a safe container to express and be held. Or create a ritual for it, but don't fear it. Don't fear it when these pieces come up. And again, they might also be coming up because we've become so busy, right? Until recently, and we just operate 24/7, constantly something going on, and so there's no time. These deep, soft pieces of us require time and space. So now that we have it, we might not recognize it, right? When they come forward, they feel weird, they feel awkward. And so don't fear them when they come. They're not going to annihilate you. They're here to be cleared and to make us even stronger and more resilient through these times. We might also be coming through some psycho-spiritual blocks. You know, we all of a sudden might feel quite stunted in our own, or we don't know the next step, or there's a blockage of some sort. So again, you can apply the same practices to this. Acknowledge. I do fun stuff with clients, like you know, personify it and take it for a cup of tea. Sit down, have a date with this thing. Like, who are you? What's your name? What do you look like? And engage in a conversation with it to find out why this piece has resurfaced at this time and what it wants to communicate. And some people are going quite deep with this stuff, and they might even be going into past life memories right now. So there could be a bit of that coming forward. And, you know, I've been hearing all kinds of stories from folks, especially this, you know, spiritually inclined and those that are quite open, where they're getting big downloads, major dreams, past life issues, you know, or it's all stuff is going on big levels. So as we tend to our outer house cleaning, it's important to tend to that inner house cleaning as well, so that when these pieces come through, we can have a clear house to invite these visitors in and understand how to be with them to then release them again. Yeah, and there's one other piece I wanted to touch on, which was signs of healthy transformation, but I'll bounce back with you, Sheryl, because there was a whole lot there. So go ahead.
Oh no, that's okay. I'm just listening to what you're saying and taking it in, and agreeing with everything. It's yeah. This is big stuff, that's going on right now. This is big for people individually and humanity collectively. And I think it's important to tap into it, to have dialogues about these things, because we need to have these conversations if we're going to move forward and, you know, into a world which we hope will be improved. Then we have to talk about these things. We have to pare them down. We've got to get to the heart of it and fix it, basically. Talk about it, heal it, fix it, whatever you want to call, you know. Let's get on with it. So carry on, Nicole.
And there's, you know, there's many in the conscious community where this is not a hard conversation to have, right? There are those that have been walking a very open, authentic path for years. And so they love this kind of thing. They know how to hold sacred space. They know how to be with these processes. And that's a beautiful thing. My concern is more for the vast majority of people who have never had these experiences before. And as these pieces surface, it's going to be those of you that are out there that have been doing the work, and this is a familiar conversation with you, to step forward at these times so that other people know they're not dying as they go through these processes, as they go through some level of an ego death, which many people are going through, or layers of their identity have been stripped away from them. It's terrifying. So if you've survived that, if you've done the work and you can quite comfortably navigate and talk through that space, you are such a valuable resource for others right now that really are like deer in, deer, what is it? Headlights. They're quite bewildered, like, what are these pieces? And those who are familiar with the conversations and processes around trauma as well, you'll know that often if we've had traumatic experiences in our past, we might not even know about it. You know, there might have been parts of our own being that protected us from something at a point in time. And so once again, when our being is ready to bring those forward, because the body never forgets, the physical body experiences all of it. It stores all of it somewhere. It has a cellular memory of absolutely everything we have been through since the moment of conception, maybe even earlier. That part is debatable. But at least from the moment of conception, we have a cellular memory of all of it. And so our body knows more stuff than our conscious mind ever could. And it kind of coffee drips it out. It's so wise. And it's very not just wise. It's quite generous. And what's the word I'm looking for? It's it'll come to me anyway. But you know, the body can take care of the mind in ways that the mind doesn't understand, you know, because there's something in us that knows when we're going to be prepared for parts of our own story to come forward. So all we can do is prepare the ground as much as possible for those pieces to emerge. So another area in terms of this conversation of, you know, being resilient and enduring trying times and challenging and times of adversity and big transformations is looking for signs of a healthy transformation. What does that look like? So I'm going to share with you some of these beautiful key indicators, again, from this glorious book by Dr. Kaysen. What does healthy transformation look like? How do you know what you're going through is kind of on the track of something that's going to be good for yourself and others? So here are some of those points. One of them is the development of noble characteristics. So things such as compassion, love, gratitude, truth, honesty, humility, those qualities and characteristics that it doesn't matter which wisdom path you come from, at their core essence, these are the things that they cultivate. They might not in the structured practice of religion that has been built around them these days. That's again another conversation, but at their essence, this is what they're trying to communicate. And we know this also from great teachers, the, you know, spiritual leaders, those that have awakened, those that show a pathway of expanded consciousness. They all point towards these same qualities. So you don't have to have had any kind of spiritual experience to be cultivating these qualities. These are the qualities of good human beings, you know, of good and true and healthy and wholesome human beings. Another sign of a transformation is a desire to be of service to humanity. So particularly that's true of those that have gone through spiritually transformative experiences. But it can be said that what we are collectively going through right now, we know it's a transformative time. And because we are beings of many dimensions, the physical, the emotional, the psychological, and the spiritual, there is a dimension of that spiritual transformation taking place. So many will awaken through this window of time to the interconnectedness of the planet that we are on, the species that we are, and then how to be of service within that to this wider web. There might also be awakening within you more of a yearning for something that is sacred, spiritual, or divine. Perhaps that's already been part of your journey, or perhaps this is a new piece, a new thread, theme that is coming through. And you might not call it those things. It might come in other ways, but to pay attention to those yearnings and then to lean into them when they come, that's a beautiful thing. And it might come even in having reflective moments or being with beautiful pieces of artwork, things that give us a sense of reverence. People might be experiencing clearer thinking and deeper insights. And again, especially if you're following through the house clearing on the external and the physical that we've already addressed, you're going to get sharper. Things are going to switch on. And if attention starts going to understanding truth and what is happening, you will find yourself engaged in a mental process where you will have to make decisions and discern certain things. So that can bring about new layers of thinking, which is pretty exciting actually, to actually think critically. We've been so indoctrinated, all of us, through the schooling system over years, and we know that this is an industrial age system that, you know, needed to packet out age groups over time to work in factories. And yet we still operate through that system. And, you know, in the Western countries, I know they say that they develop critical thinking within the curriculum. I've been within the school systems. I really question that. There might be pieces of it here and there, but by the time you get into university, and I've, you know, gone all the way through that process as well, I'm not quite sure that there is much of, you know, true critical thinking happening out there. So to engage that and to be clear thinking and of clear mind. And we got two more. There might also be the development of creativity. So whether that's spontaneous or whether that, again, is that desire and that yearning to re-engage our creative paths, that too might happen through a transformative process. And then possibly spontaneous mystical states. And I certainly know from talking with, you know, my tribe, the Agents of Awesome, and other people generally who walk a spiritual path, there's a whole heap of that happening at this point in time right now. Some of it welcome and some of it not. And so again, as you center yourself and you ground and you do all of the well-being stuff that is needed to be a grounded human being, it will help you hold more of those pieces that are going to be coming through you for communication at this time. Wow, I feel like I talked a whole heap there, Sheryl.
You did, but that's okay because I was listening. I think we should probably round it up though. Unless people have got, are there comments there that you can see that people...
I can see. Teresa's been wonderful. Thank you for joining us through all of that. You know, there's some gorgeous commentary along the way. Death is a taboo subject for many who haven't done the work. Yeah, things about spiritual life, also about, you know, fasting and the value of that, as many wisdom paths can attest to. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to end today, I guess, with an affirmation that people can carry on with them. And I actually came across one the other day on the internet. And this was about spiritual resilience, but you could use it for resilience in general. But it says spiritual resilience gives me the power to stand strong like a rock and have enough power to strengthen others. And I think that's really important, because when we connect with something greater than ourselves, it has the opportunity to fill us up so that we overflow, and it flows on to other people. And I think that's in so many different things, in a positive attitude, in a calmness that we carry within ourselves, in a peace that we carry within ourselves. When we're filled with that, other people, they know that, and it flows out to them too. And many, many times I've had people say to me, I always feel very calm around you, because I am a very calm person generally. And, so, I think that it's drawing on that resilience can fill us up and provide opportunities for it to spread, not just out through the people around us, but out through them as well.
And it's that beautiful adage of, we might not remember what people say, but we remember how they made us feel.
Yeah.
And, there's a gorgeous story I heard of someone in their near-death experience, and when they had their life review moment, and this is something that can happen amongst near-death experiences, they not only get to review what happened, but they actually feel through key moments in life how others that were in that interaction felt. They feel the feelings of others. And that's pretty profound. If that happens to be one of the things that we might get to experience at the end of life, the words don't matter in so many ways, but how we vibe each other, how we be with one another is so key to that. And so if we can pay attention to how we be with ourselves, right? Because that's the starting point for each of us. Then in that moment, we're going to ripple out goodness, when we tend to all of those pieces that we've been talking about today.
Yeah, true. So thanks everyone. Thanks for joining us, for those who are going to listen to this later. And we hope that we've been able to give you some sort of thoughts, help, support in any way that you may be able to take on board. And Nicole and I will be back next week having another conversation about the light side of the dark. So hopefully join us then next Wednesday at 12 noon, every Wednesday at 12 noon on the Bodylight Centre page.
And if there are particular topics under that greater umbrella of the light side of the dark that you want to hear about, let us know as well. We're very open to, as you can see, we like to have a banter. So let us know.
Thank you. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Sheryl.
Bye.